People who knew someone who died in a freak accident. What happened? Story 1. I used to work for a septic company. A guy who drove one of the big septic trucks that sucked out underground septic tanks at people's houses had to get on his hands and knees and reach into the tank because the lid had fallen in. He lost his balance and fell head first. His shoulders got wedged in the opening and he drowned upside down in human waste. I don't think I've ever heard of a worse way to go. The homeowner found him after about an hour. Story 2. I worked with the nicest guy in IT. He was a gentle soul who retrained to be a tree surgeon. Been working at it for a year when he was hanging up a tree in a harness using a chainsaw that was also secured with a rope. It must have got away from him as he was found still in the harness but cut almost in two. Story 3. Me and a group of friends went on a snowboarding trip and one of the guys ran into a tree going at a brisk speed but not too fast. We brought it into the ski lodge to have some beers shortly after and he started complaining about a headache. A few hours later he was rambling about a puppy he had as a kid and losing his train of thought. He died in the hospital after we called an ambulance when he couldn't walk. He had a bleed in his brain from the impact. Story 4. Kid I was tangentially friends with in high school decided to run away from home. He was upset that he didn't have enough money to get a bus ticket to where he wanted to go and threw down his duffel bag in disgust. The handgun he had in it went off and it shot him in the stomach. Story 5. I got a few. Just a month ago, a friend was riding his Harley home from work. Some meatball kid tried to slipstream around traffic, didn't see him, and nicked his bike. He died from the crash and road rash because he was wearing a beanie helmet and the road ripped off his jawline and he bled out before EMS could get there. In college, a pal of mine was riding one of those open-top Jeeps around some mountain ledges. His dog, who was harnessed in, did something and distracted him. The Jeep hit the inside wall, then careened to the cliff barrier and he popped out of his seatbelt over the hood and fell 100 feet into the ravine. His hand was still in the dog's harness with the dog in the Jeep. And last, a high school friend of my brother's in the middle 1980s stopped to help someone with a flat tire. While he kneeled to look at the flat, the other driver shot him in the back of his head. That car was stolen and the murderer stole his car which they found days later hundreds of miles away. Case was never solved. Story 6. My cousin was killed by Chrysler. There was a defect in the hatch of Chrysler minivans where if they were hit from the inside, they would open unexpectedly. My aunt was moving the car out of the driveway so the other kids could play hockey or whatever. Just backing the car into the street. She put my cousin in the back so he wouldn't run behind the car as she pulled out. They lived on a little cul-de-sac, no danger of other vehicles. One of the kids called her name, so she hit the brakes. My cousin lost his balance and hit the inside of the hatch, which opened. He fell out and hit his head and was taken off life support 3 days later. It later came out that this issue was raised by an engineer and when he wouldn't drop it, Chrysler fired him rather than fixing it. Story 7. When I worked on load at UPS. One of the other loaders tried to race a trailer and save a package and got pinched on the loading dock. When you've loaded a trailer and it pulls out, some of the doors can't be closed because they swing open instead of being pulled down like a garage door. Sometimes a package will fall out. The trailers move really fast and the drivers don't have a lot of visibility so you're never supposed to jump down and save a package. A lot of people do it anyway. This guy wasn't quick enough and he got caught between the dock and the deck of the new trailer. It pinched him in half basically. They kept the trailer there long enough for him to call his family before he died. Basically, the second the trailer pulled out and relieved pressure, those two arteries that feed blood to your legs just dumped blood out and that was it for him. Not a good day at work. I never jumped for a package again. Story 8. This happened many years ago but my childhood neighbor died due to sleepwalking. I don't remember the exact details as I was quite young. He was into working out and one night, I guess he managed to go to his bench press and started lifting. The bar ended up crushing his neck and he suffocated. His parents had to find him like this in the morning. Really tragic. Story 9. Nearly 3 decades ago, my best friend's sister was arguing with her boyfriend on a sheet of ice over a big river. She stepped on the wrong spot, broke the ice, and fell into the water's current, which took her along with it. Story 10. My friend's boyfriend's family. His dad died after a long illness. Boyfriend's two older brothers, one an Air Force pilot, rented a puddle jumper to fly over their dad's favorite lake to scatter the ashes. The place they rented the plane from had lied about the plane passing inspection, and they crashed soon after takeoff. The pilot brother died, but they said he managed to land the plane in such a way so that his passenger brother survived. Surviving brother is now paralyzed from the neck down. So in a matter of days, his poor mother lost her husband, her son, and became full-time caretaker of her now paralyzed son. Story 11. A family friend was a hydroplane racer who hit a bottle floating in the water that made his boat disintegrate and killed him. As far as I know, they still run a 5K in his memory some 40 to 45 years later. Story 12. My dad's friend, who was not incredibly bright, was using a hay baler one day and it got jammed up. Instead of turning it off and using a stick to clear the debris from the baler, he left it running and started kicking the debris. Well, it cleared the debris, sucked him in, and baled him into a bale of hay. His father could hear it from several fields over. Story 13. One of my dad's good friends was driving a four-wheeler and it rolled over on top of him. He was wearing a helmet, but the handlebars of the ATV pushed through the visor on his helmet, crushing his skull. Story 14. I didn't know them, but worked opposite some building works in central London. They were having some huge windows installed, very thick and heavy glass, which was stored incorrectly, kind of leant against the building. A girl walked past it and was, I believe, on a call, so had stopped walking. Somehow the glass pane fell on top of her and crushed her to death. I walked past that every day on the way to work. The evening it happened I walked past and there a white tent with forensics around. So tragic. Story 15. I knew a kid in high school who tried to spook his younger brother by pretending that he was going to hang himself. He slipped, fell from the tree and actually did it. Story 16. A college friend of mine was visiting her grandfather on his farm in Florida. She decided to go swimming in the pond alone one night and wasn't around the next morning. They discovered some of her clothing and some of her body by the pond. She had been eaten by an alligator. I once was alone waiting for friends to arrive at an Airbnb in Jacksonville and thought I'd stroll along the beach in the early evening before they arrived. I saw a very large log move towards me on the trail there. Alligators are much faster and stronger than most folks realize. Story 17. My little sister, when she was 4. We were jet skiing in North Carolina. She, my uncle, and my cousin were all on one. They got about 6 feet away from the dock and they asked to swim back. They had life jackets on, so it was fine. Uncle plops my cousin down, fine. He plops my sister down, directly on top of a Portuguese man-o-war. She instantly starts screaming and he pulls her back out of the water. The thing was literally wrapped around her leg. For months afterwards it looked like someone had taken an X-Acto knife to her leg. Fortunately she barely has a scar anymore and doesn't even remember. She also can get literally anything she wants from our uncle because he still feels horrible about almost sacrificing his goddaughter to a monster jellyfish. Story 18. Co-worker ate a whole pizza and his stomach exploded. Well, his stomach didn't literally explode, but he did rupture his intestines. He'd been taking large amounts of ibuprofen as per doctor's order because of an injury. It thinned the lining of his gastrointestinal tract to the point where the pizza was too much. He wound up in the ICU for almost a week. Weird thing is he's not even a big guy, he's actually incredibly fit and active. Story 19. 5 years ago a family moved into my neighborhood. Husband, wife and some kids. Well, in the home they moved into, there was an elevator. Now, in my neighborhood a lot of homes have elevators in them. So, we all know how to operate and fix them and whatnot. Except these people didn't because they've never had one on their home before. The dad, who was a very funny guy and loved to play jokes, decided he would try to scare his daughters. He climbed on top of the elevator and was going to scare them by making noises up the shaft. Well, one of the daughters decided to figure out what was going on and she sent up the elevator. Nobody was in it to stop it, and you can't stop it from the outside. He got crushed. They were there for only a week when this happened. They still live there and have since gotten rid of the elevator. Story 20. I know this starts off sounding like I'm making a joke, but I'm not. A friend of a friend died because a helicopter crashed on top of him. He was not in the helicopter. He was not near an airport. The helicopter crashed and landed on my friend's friend. Story 21. In 4th grade this kid in my class got a bow for Christmas. He was outside playing with it and shot it into the sky, and the arrow came down and into his face, right above his eye and into his brain. The doctors removed it with minimal damage, and he was the poster child for that particular hospital for a while. He died in a car accident a year or so after we graduated. If you've gotten this far and enjoying the content, please leave a comment of your own story. We'd love to make a video of them in the future. Story 22. Guy I knew was killed by a gunshot. He was relaxing in his hotel room when the idiot next door shot a handgun into the wall. It hit him in the balls and he bled to death before he could reach the phone. Horrible. Story 23. Kid I went to high school with came from a wealthy family but was interested in making his own way. Got a good factory job right out of high school. First week on the job, an old pipe comes out of its supports on the ceiling, swings down, pins him to a wall, and kills him. He was standing in the worst possible spot. 18 years old, really bad luck. Story 24. Classmate killed by leopard. He studied conservation and was a junior game ranger. From reports, he was bringing tourists back from a late afternoon viewing drive. He stopped on a bridge just before the camp to give the tourists a view of the sunset. He got out of the vehicle to check on something and was ambushed by a leopard and pulled off the bridge. Seems the leopard was old and had teeth problems, so it was moving close to camps looking for easy prey. He just happened to be the unlucky prey. Story 25. I have a few colleagues, just in the last 8 months alone. One was killed when a drunk semi-truck driver drove through the gas pump he was fueling up at. Another was an accomplished and experienced athlete, killed when his snowmobile flipped on him. The third was practicing on a closed road. The car left the road by a few feet and he was impaled on a fence post. It's been a horrible year. Story 26. Knew someone who was on a date walking through downtown. Suddenly their date was crushed by someone who jumped off the high-rise building they were walking past. Their date died instantly, as did the person who landed on them. Story 27. Got a tongue piercing. That same night, took a sleeping pill to sleep. Choked to death on his tongue, which was swollen from the piercing. Story 28. Knew this kid in high school who always ran from class to class pulling his roller backpack behind him. So it's no surprise when he visited the Grand Canyon with family that he wanted to run down a slope. Well, he got going too fast and couldn't stop himself. His entire family watched him run off the side of the Grand Canyon. Story 29. A friend of mine from college had a summer job driving a big delivery truck. At the end of the day, they'd come back, park the trucks, and then check the tires to make sure they weren't overheated or required any other maintenance. So my friend brought his delivery truck back after his shift and then knelt down in front of it to check the tires. One was clearly overheated, so he loosened it to take it off and relieve some of the pressure and heat. The pressure was so great that the tire exploded in his face, but that wasn't what killed him. When it exploded, the rims caught him right under the chin. It knocked him backwards with such force that it crushed the back of his head. Story 30. There was this guy 3 to 4 years my junior in high school who I sometimes bumped into. Few years after graduating from high school, I read the local newspaper and saw him there. Apparently, just like most teenagers, one night he had a heated discussion with his family and then stormed out whatever room he was in, slamming the door behind him. Well, the door was a door window and the glass broke and a shard of it stabbed him in the leg. He died from blood loss at home before the ambulance even showed up. Story 31. He was shortstop in a high school baseball game. Other team hits the ball. Ball hits my friend square in the chest. His heart stopped. They tried to do CPR, but he was gone before the ambulance got there. Story 32. My insurance guy was pulling a limb out of a large tree with a chain and a rope. He was behind the pickup, his wife was driving the truck. Rope snapped from the strain and chain snapped back and hit him in the head, killing him instantly. He was in his 50s. Ironic thing is this is exactly the sort of scenario he would describe as to why you need life insurance. Story 33. Guy I knew was driving a tractor-trailer with a stack of pipe on the back. He swerved to avoid an accident after a car cut him off, went into the ditch, and was cut in half when the load was propelled forward by the inertia from the sudden stop. Story 34. A guy I went to high school with got hit by a train. It wasn't suicide. It was before Uber and he had been at a party drinking. He did the responsible thing by taking the subway. When he heard the train coming, he stood up to take a step forward, like everyone does, but was so drunk that he stumbled over his own feet and fell onto the track. Story 35. My sister-in-law's aunt died of hypothermia. She went for a walk out in the hills in the winter. She knew the trail very well but got disoriented by a light snowfall and got lost. She got cold and tired, laid down by a rock and died of hypothermia. She was 100 yards from her car. Story 36. Girl I grew up with was driving home in college and got into a horrible car accident that gave her brain damage and pretty much removed her jaw from her skull. Tons of surgery, and 3 years later, she walked down the aisle at her wedding. She was in her yard a few months after her wedding and she slipped and fell and hit her head on the pavement patio, and her husband found her dead. Story 37. A friend of my dad's was overseeing a repaired braided 3/4-inch cable being spooled from one drum to another at very high speed and tension. He had his gloved hand loosely on the wire guiding it into position, which is a big no-no in the industry. A frayed wire came through, snagged his glove and dragged him into the drum, wrapping him into a contorted paste within seconds. Story 38. A friend of a friend showed up at his girlfriend's apartment with a head wound. He didn't know how it happened. He also didn't know how he drove over there. She took him to the ER where he ended up passing away. He had his keys, wallet and phone on him. The only thing we could think of is he might have tripped, fell and hit his head in the wrong spot. Story 39. There was a person at the beach who got impaled by a flying beach umbrella. Horrible situation. Her husband was right beside her and she died within seconds. Knew a guy who was in a car crash and saw his aunt almost beheaded. He was about 10. Screwed up his mind. At about 20 he flipped his dirt bike with his girlfriend on the back and it cracked her head open. They were deep in the woods camping. She died. Couple years later he was stealing a motorcycle. While walking it across the street at night in the rain, he got hit by a car. Lost a leg. Couple years after that he was angry at a music venue, so he and a friend tried to build a bomb in a parking lot. It went off and they both were killed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Thread Talk for more content like this. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out. Have a dope day and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers!